Welcome to The Subverse. I am your host, Susan Matthews. This is a podcast where we journey from forest soundscapes to fragile oceans, from the complexity of development to the art of resistance, from colonial histories that haunt us to reimagining our futures. Going with our theme of water this season, this episode is a conversation with Nandini Oza, the former president of the Oral History Association of India. I really enjoyed speaking with her. Nandini is an amazing researcher, writer, chronicler, and an archivist. She was an activist with the powerful people's movement, the Narmada Bachao Andolan, for over a decade. In 2004, she began recording the oral histories of prominent leaders and activists of the Andolan, both local and from outside the Narmada Valley, and of impacted people belonging to adivasi, farming, and other natural resource-dependent communities. These oral histories, these people's histories, are a powerful testimony to an iconic development struggle, fighting the large-scale damming of the river Narmada, India's longest west-flowing river, flowing through 3 states. The Sardar Sarovar project is the terminal dam on the river in Gujarat and alone aimed to submerge 245 villages with a population of 250,000, many of whom are adivasi and other natural resource dependent communities. The oral histories cover experiences of submergence, loss, displacement, but also stories of struggle, resilience, and bravery against governmental, bureaucratic, and legal machinery. This has been a struggle that has inspired many, including myself. I visited the Narmada Valley in 1993 in my law school years for a 3-week trip, and it was the most formative experience of my life in terms of setting me on the path of public interest law. A mythic and beautiful river with a deep archaeological and spiritual history. In this wonderful conversation, we hear from Nandini on what this oral history archive means, the continuing struggles people in the valley face, and what this says for other development struggles, and most importantly, our attempts to subjugate our waters. Thank you so much for joining us, Nandini, at The Subverse.
Thank you to you, actually. Thank you so much.
I'm going to start by asking you a little bit about what oral history entails. And if you could tell us about what the Oral History of India Association does.
There are very many technical definitions now. It has become an advanced field of study. But when I started out, there's no formal training in oral history. Now, of course, courses are available, workshops are available. So my understanding began that it was an amazing way of transferring history from one generation to another in a country like India, where there are languages without written script. People have a lot to say, but they may not write it. And oral history is this powerful medium of the marginalized sections where history can continue to be transferred orally. And I was seeing that in the Narmada Valley, in the Adivasi area, where the traditional form of passing on people's history was orally. Songs would be sung to a large group for nights on end, where the younger generation would pick up. So that was very fascinating. But as I started working on the oral histories more seriously, I realized that for me, the definition, very important definition, is that it's a people's history. It's in their voice. It often challenges the official or the mainstream or the history of the powerful. It is decentralized way of knowing many events which would otherwise be totally forgotten and marginalized. So this is my understanding of oral history, that it is people's history, which often challenges the dominant history of a nation state, of the powerful. And Oral History Association of India is increasingly people like me across the country, many years have been feeling that for a country like India, oral history is very important. because, as I said, there are lots of languages without written script, and people do transfer histories orally, and otherwise also not many people write, and there are, even if scripts available, people are comfortable speaking rather than writing. So Oral History Association of India was founded in 2013 as a membership organization by practicing oral historians who are archiving, recording, networking, trying to understand and build on whatever was available in India. So that is what OHI does, trying to also bring people together in this field, working in this field, and promote this whole field as much as possible. So that's OHI, we call it. It's been there since 2013. It's a membership-driven organization.
I'm just curious in terms of digitalization, because with the rise of that, has that helped in a way in terms of archiving oral history? And what are some of the setbacks?
With digitization, it's an incredible opening up of several opportunities which I had not thought of when I started out. I started out with a tape recorder, and there were so many shortcomings because the bulk of tapes you had to carry, the batteries, particularly in Narmada Valley, where many villages had no electricity, the storage problems, and the sound quality. But with a digitized recorder, storage became easy, recording became easy, the bulk that I had to carry became easy, reaching out, the sound quality became much better. But I think the major advantage that I see is in the dissemination. Today, with the kind of, even in a small remote village, there would be smartphone or a mobile where it can be heard, the voices of the people can be heard. So that is for me very fascinating, and it has helped. So people who have spoken, their next generation can in their village hear what they have said, even if they are no more. Otherwise often these records remain very far away from the place where they are collected, with no scope of easy access unless efforts are made. Whereas here you can hear the oral histories by your previous generation in the Narmada Valley at your doorstep, in your home, sitting at home. So that, I feel, it helps to empower people, democratize the process. It's more participatory, I feel. There's more back and forth. The people's participation is there. You can add, people may come back and say, oh, I have to add this is not being recorded. So many different advantages in this system. Setbacks, I would say, for people like us, it's a major, I would not say setback, a very major learning graph in a very short time, from tape recorders to mini discs to digitization to cope with this expansion of possibilities, to constantly run with it and always feel that, this could have been done, this can be done much better. So far, I felt it was good. I switched to digital recording and dissemination. Yes.
I'm now really curious to get stuck into the project itself, the project that you began in 2004, where you started documenting and speaking with activists who were all part of the Narmada Valley movement. So if you can give us a little bit about the background of this and how you began this project.
As an activist of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, full-time activist for 12 years, and being with the people in the valley in midst of their struggle, very intense struggle, very, very intense. Everybody knows about it. I don't need to get into the details. I used to be fascinated with the kind of insights, the power of the people, the way they fought, their thoughts, and their strength. And even in midst of adversary, there was police state, in very difficult times, their spirit and their in-depth thinking and what they spoke, what they shared, it used to amaze me. And I used to feel that, oh God, this will get all lost, because in midst of a struggle, you don't record it. You have 100 policemen in front, you're going to jail. But I thought that these thoughts, why people fought, how they fought, why do they want to fight, what is important for them in their lives to save, what are the strategies they are adopting, why are they adopting, are they failing, are they succeeding, what do they think of courts, what do they think of these projects. it's very important to have this recorded somewhere. And so when I stopped working as a full-time activist, I thought recording the oral histories of the people, which would include all of these questions and their own role in the movement, I felt was also very important, because often it is believed that only extraordinary people can fight. But in the Narmada Valley, we saw Adivasi women. What amazing strength, standing up before the government of Gujarat right near the dam site fearlessly. So how do you capture all this, their thoughts, their emotions, their role? And I thought oral history was a very important, and recording their own, all of this in their own voices would be a step towards the right direction. And so I began doing it. And that's how, over a period of several years, recorded about 80 senior members of the organization, Narmada Bachao Andolan, spread over 3 states in 7 different languages and dialects, because the impact of the dam is in 3 states. So the languages were different, dialects were different. And yes, about 400 hours of digital recording, which I'm trying to now focus on bringing them out, because initially my focus was to record as many. No, actually, the movement started in 61. The first resistance began in 61. So the initial thrust was to record as many people as possible, because they were getting older, memories were failing. So yes, but now I'm focusing more on dissemination. So that's how I started.
Thank you, Nandini. It's really quite a project, I have to say. And I had a chance to visit Narmada when I was in law school in 1993, as I've told you. And I have seen for myself firsthand the courage of people there. And it is really something quite marvelous to behold.
Thank you. Yes, it is. All of us who have been able to see it in our lifetime are lucky, I feel. It's left lifetime of impact.
When I was looking at your website and going through the way the archive is presented, I liked the way you sort of divided up some of the subject matter so that people could access it. And there were 2 issues I thought that we could talk about a little bit more today. The first is submergence and displacement, because for many cases, this was really kind of the front line, that they were in the submergence zone of the dams and they were displaced. So I'd like to speak a little bit about this, and what we'd like to do for our listeners is play a couple of clips, and if we could then discuss it a little bit.
तेर बुकड़ा लेक बुला पिन पाटी ले दिली पानी पीने गई तो हुली फंसी गई तीने बोरी मर गई एक गाय ते गाय भी फंसी मर पेट में बचो तो सी भी मर गई 60 बुकड़ी थी तीने में 4-5 एक बुकड़ी थे मुंगरू खाई खाई मिटाड़ देनी पेला मुनी देखतला काई नहीं होता पड़े तो माल भी हुके तो माण हे पण हुके था बीता बीता जाए ना उन पड़तलू ये सेला सुरा भी हसौने काठी से आमरो खेती डूब गईली वाजेन कांदे हुदला हूँ आमरो जंगल बाह से जंगल का बाह को ये नोन का आय को ये हमरी कोरी नाम जीव रोला जंगल उजाड़ी काटी कुटीन उजाड़ी देवे दाना देव झाड़ बीड़ गाठाड़ीन एने वागोन रिछो गाठाड़ीन सिरकार का होतरी मोटी लांड मिलत रही इते लांडी बात छे ने ते तेरो तेरो मुंड रुकले दलो मुंडो गोले फांदाव गई ते आफरू निकोणी ने अतरे आंबो तेरो मुंड रुकाई गयो ते आफरू हे जावणी नी ते पेल कोहली खाजी वही तती कौन देखे तू तो जान जोइन बंद कर देनी ते जाए का तेरा पेट में कतरो से कतरो मरिया ने कतरो कहीं आज जो मरतो आज मान है भी मरने बाजरी.
Nandini, if you could tell us a little bit about who Parvi was and what she speaks about in this particular clip.
I'm glad you started with Pervi, because unfortunately she's no more. An incredible Adivasi leader of 2 organizations, in fact, the Khedut Mazdoor Chetna Sangathan in earlier the Jabua district, now Alirajpur in Madhya Pradesh. Her village Jalsindi falls in the submersion zone of the Sadasur project, and also the leader of Narmada Bachao Andolan. She's unfortunately no more. Her village is, most of it is submerged, surrounded by water on 3 sides. This is only a short clip that is being played out of a very long interview of Pervi, where she actually narrates the whole history of why and how they struggled and what end it has come to. So I would request people who have the time to go back. But the short clip, just mentions her idea of what a river and forest is for them, and that the struggle was not merely for displacement of people and right for rehabilitation, but she says that we consider the forest our father and the river our mother, unlike all of us who think these are resources to encash for market. For people who are dependent, the Adivasis who are dependent on natural resources, this is a relationship. These are not resources to be used. She says the forest is our father, the river the mother. And by building a dam on the river Narmada, actually you have choked our mother, the river. It's a noose. The dam is a death noose, and it has been turned into a dead carcass because the water is no longer flowing. It's become polluted. It's become dirty. And therefore, along with the river, all that was in her belly, the fish, the crocodiles, all have been impacted very adversely and are dying. So you have, by building a dam, choked a free-flowing Mother Narmada and turned her into a carcass, which has impacted the living things inside, and that in turn are also attacking people, like the crocodiles. The siltation that has been created, the pollution that has been created in the river is affecting everybody living on the banks of the river. So this is basically, she's trying to say that how a dam is a death noose, choking of a river.
I found it a very, very powerful testimony. The part when she says how many things were in her belly, the belly of the river, and what all died. Now the river is dead, and along with it, we are also dying.
True. Because, the whole ecology changed and the crocodiles have become very aggressive. Their natural food, everything, the chain has been disrupted. So they attack people, which they never used to do earlier, attack domestic cattle, goats, buffaloes, cows that go to the now reservoir and get stuck in the silt, attack them. So it's affected everybody, yes.
It's fascinating what you mentioned about the crocodiles. We have no idea how our human activities change ecosystems so completely.
Yes, yeah. In fact, this whole thing, the impact of building a dam on fish, on crocodiles and other living things, it's generally completely ignored. Nobody pays any attention. Although the Ministry of Environment, Government of India had said that there have to be studies of the loss of fisheries, impact on fisheries, but they have not yet been completed, in fact, not been completed.
Thank you, Nandini. I'd like to move on to the second clip, which also I found absolutely fascinating, which is by Rahmat.
लगता है कि नर्मदा घाटी काफ़ी पुरानी ह्यूमन सेटलमेंट रही है। फिर डॉक्टर एस.बी. ओटा, जो आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया का, उन्होंने काफ़ी गहन काम किया है। जो इलाका है, बड़ा इलाका है, या लगभग सारा ही इलाका सरदार सरोवर की डूब वाला इलाका है। उन्होंने सरदार सरोवर की डूब में के इलाके में घूम के करीब 94 एंशिएंट माउंट ढूंढे, और यहाँ जो प्रमाण मिले हैं उनके खुदाई में, वो काफ़ी मतलब इस तरीके के कि देश में कुछ तो पहली बार मिले हैं। जैसे खापरखेड़ा में लकड़ी की मोहर मिली है, जो सबसे पुरानी, देश की सबसे पुरानी लकड़ी की मोहर खापरखेड़ा में मिली है। खापरखेड़ा में दूसरा फिर ये मिला है कि लोहा गलाने की भट्टी मिली है। अब पिपरी में हम देखते हैं तो पिट ड्वेलर्स के साथ कई तरह के प्रेसियस स्टोन मिले हैं। कार्नेलियन मिला है, लेपिस लेजुली मिला है। तो डॉक्टर ओटा का जो काम है वो सरदार सरोवर के क्षेत्र में ही रहा, और इसमें इस तरीके के जानकारियाँ मिली है जो कहीं मिलती नहीं। जैसा सरकार शायद इसलिए डरी कि और यदि कुछ डिटेल्ड यहाँ पर अध्ययन यदि करवाया तो शायद ऐसी चीज़ें मिल जाए जो देश में पहली बार कहीं मिली है, तो फिर और भी अध्ययन की ज़रूरत होगी, और भी अध्ययन की ज़रूरत होगी, मतलब फिर सरदार सरोवर को रोकना पड़ेगा। इसलिए नावड़ा खेड़ी का जो काम है वो रुकवाया। अचानक काम चल रहा था और उस समय रुकवाया काफ़ी, लेकिन दुर्भाग्य से वो फिर सरकार ने आगे बढ़ने नहीं दिया, दुनिया के सामने सच्चाई आने नहीं दी।
Yes, this is another field which is of great interest to me, in particular, being a student of history and archaeology. I am very interested. River valleys are very old, river valleys are very rich civilizations, Narmada in particular. So often we see things on what is there on the ground. There are hundreds of very historical temples and other religious sites. Some of them, the Adivasis cannot even be relocated. None of them have been documented. But what Rehmat, a very senior activist of the Narmada Bachao Andolan and an oustee himself from village Chikalda, is trying to say in this clip is that we don't see the enormous wealth below the ground that's submerging in the Narmada. It's a very rich archaeological site, the whole Narmada Valley. And in fact, the Archaeological Survey of India had insisted that they be allowed to complete the studies of the several sites that will be permanently submerged, rich archaeological sites that will be submerged in the Sardar Sarovar Dam. In fact, the Archaeological Survey of India, Government of India, Rehmat says, had identified 90 mounds. And while they were studying, they were not allowed to complete the studies. And he says that this was on purpose because government did not want the archaeological wealth of the Narmada Valley that was to submerge be out in public domain, because that would again be a very important argument against a large dam. This is just a short clip, but if you go to his longer interview, he talks about his own village, Chikalda, the pit dwellers, evidences of pit dwellers that are found there. So all these things have not only been not documented, they were not allowed to be studied. So he talks about the loss by a dam of the rich archaeological river valley civilization that was the Narmada, and without any documentation and studies. So it's a very major loss, already gone underwater.
Absolutely. And from what I understand, we're talking about one of the most unique sites in India and in the world. We'll be back after a break. Thank you so much, Nandini. We'll move on to the third clip, which is also a really, really moving one by Champabin Tadwi, where she talks about what happens after resettlement.
કોઈ પણ બહેનો અમારી મંજૂરી ત્યાં ના જાય. અહીંયા આવીને બહેનોની મંજૂરી કાઢી. ઘરમાંથી કાઢી કાઢીને ખાવાનું પકવવાનું ચોમાસાની અંદરમાં. ત્યાં હું કામ મંજૂરિયા જાય? આદમી ના મંજૂરિયા જાય એટલે ભૂખે મરી જાય. એટલે કઈ જૂનિયા ગામમાં બહુ અમારા સુખ હતો ને આવી તકલીફ પણ નથી બેન. હે સવાર મેં 8 વાગે ઢોણા છોડી કાઢ્યા, સાંજે 5 વાગે અમને ટાઈમ થાય એટલે ખીલે આવી જાય ને અહીંયા જરીક છોડી કાઢ્યા ને એટલે જવું પડે. જતા રહે એટલે પટેલિયા તરત હાંકી લઈ જાય. અમારી બધી જાતની તકલીફ જૂની ભૂમિ પર આવ્યા તેનાથી તકલીફ જ હોય. અહીંયા છૂક લેવા જાય ને ત્યાં ઉલટા મયરા એવું હે. અહીંયા જૂના ગામે ની ખાતર નાખવાનું નહીં, પાણી લેવાનું, જેનું ચોમાસાનું પાણી પડે એટલું પકવા જાય. અહીંયા તકલીફ એટલે જો ખાતર નાખવાનું પૈસાથી, પાણી નાખવાનું પૈસાથી, ટ્રેક્ટર મારવાનું પાણીથી, એટલે ખર્ચાવાળી જમીન એવું અહીંયા. એટલે ત્યાં અમારા કશું પાણીથી માંડી, લાકડાથી માંડી પૈસા નહીં ખર્ચવાનો. એટલે જૂની ભૂમિ પર તકલીફ નહીં અમારી. ને અહીંયા સુખ ના મળે એવું હે. સુખ મળવા જાય ને ત્યાં કોઈથી પૈસા કઈથી કાઢવાનું, એટલે તકલીફ ખરી ને. રાતે પણ ના ઊંઘ આવે એવું કામ હે બેન. આ વસાટ મેં તો આવ્યા એટલે હું તો કેટલા વર્ષ થયા ને, 12-13 વર્ષ થયા અહીંયા મને વસાવ્યા, પણ કોઈ દાડો છૂકી નહીં. ઉલટું આપણે અવડા ઘટી જાય પણ ઓછી થાય પણ વધારે ના થાય એવી તકલીફ અહીંયા. આ પારકી ભૂમિ પર એટલે પારકી રીતે જ રહેવું પડે બેન.
This is also a very important interview because often people say that, oh, rehabilitation, everyone is being rehabilitated. What's the big deal? In fact, Government of India, Gujarat government has claimed that this is the best rehabilitation in the world in some of their publications. So it's very important to know what actually the people, and particularly women and Adivasi marginalized sections of the society, feel about rehabilitation. So this particular interview was taken, I think, 10 to 13, 12 years after Champaben's displacement from her original village, Vadgam, to another site called Dharampuri resettlement site. And she explains the difference. 13 years, 10, 13 years is a long period. In fact, we used to be told by dam builders that by displacement, by migration, you develop. It's essential for human progress. See, there are forcible displacement is a different thing from a voluntary migration out of choice. You can't compare the two. So this forcible displacement of Champaben to a resettlement site, in fact, not very far from from her original village, also at the end of 10 to 13 years, she feels that she's lost her sleep. She's never been able to sleep peacefully after having been relocated to the resettlement site. She has said in profound statements like, I've never been happy since my displacement. She also compares the lives, in the resettlement site and her original village. Her longer interview, I would request people to listen. This is just a short clip where she says that initially in the old original village, we used to just leave our cattle to graze in the forest and they would come back home on their own. Whereas in the resettlement site, they have to accompany the cattle because if they stray, because there is no grazing land, only small patches available here and there. And by mistake, if they graze into the Patel or the upper caste landlords' lands, then they had it. So it increases their work. She also said that in the original village, the wood was free for them, fodder was free, the economy was more or less self-sustaining. Women never had to go out for wage labor, which they have to make ends meet in the resettlement site. They had minor forest produce from which they could sustain in the old village. Their crops were different. There were more food crops that they grew. They never used chemical pesticides and fertilizers in the old village, which they have to in the new village. So, and what most striking I find in this short clip that I've shared, her entire interview is very profound, is that she says that we have come to a foreign land, so we have to live like foreigners. So, because the language has changed, the dress has changed, the culture has changed, the society has changed, the caste has changed, everything, the food has changed. So, I mean, she continues to feel like a foreigner, though her original village is just one district away, because everything in Gujarat we say that every 12 kilometers the language changes. That's it. And for Adivasi people to be brought into non-Adivasi areas where they're looked down upon, it's a major cultural, social, apart from economic loss, it's killing their culture. It's a very major loss. And they continue to feel as foreigners even after 10 to 13 years of resettlement. So this is a very important clip. I feel everyone must listen to it. That what displacement by development projects, forcible displacement does to people.
I totally agree with you. I did sort of notice so many references to happiness, as you said. And that really struck me. And I think often we try to look at some of the impacts of these kinds of projects in terms of livelihoods and those kinds of losses. But we often don't deal with the psychological trauma that these kinds of events leave behind. And
yes,
and that really comes through, I think, in this particular clip. And for myself, I would really love to listen to that longer interview. The next clip that we're going to play, the last one in this particular section, is a short clip of Sita Rambai.
पूरे भारत में एक नर्मदा ऐसी मात्र नदी है जहाँ से निकलती है वो डायरेक्ट लोटा भर के पानी पियो, जहाँ तक मिलती है वहाँ भी लोटा भर के पानी पियो। ऐसी नदी भारत में एक भी नहीं है, एक भी नदी ऐसी नहीं है कि अंत तक पानी इतना शुद्ध साफ सुथरा, क्योंकि बहती थी। नदियाँ जो बहती है ना, पहाड़ों से टकराती है, पत्थरों से टकराती है, तो उसमें अपने आप में फिल्टर है। ऊपर से गिरेगी, पत्थरों से टकरा के कल जो शब्द है ना, वो फिल्टर है। अब वो उनका जो गति बहाव की तो रुक गई, फिल्टर कहाँ से होगा, वो तो गंदा होना ही है। नर्मदा जो बहती है, टकराती है पत्थरों से, वो ऊपर से झरने गिरते हैं, वो फिल्टर हो जाता है। और वही कारण था कि नर्मदा में नीचे से ऊपर तक पानी पियो, शुद्ध पानी।
Again, one of my favorites, Sitaram Bhai, also one of the stalwarts of the Narmada Bachao Andolan. He passed away only very recently, a great storyteller. We learned so much from him as an activist. His own village is in the submersion zone of SSP, very seriously impacted already. Sitaram Bhai, a great storyteller, talks here about the story and the life of the river Narmada and the resources on her bank. This is just a short clip, but there is a longer one which is available on the YouTube and the Narmada Oral History website. I would again request everybody to listen. I think it's about 25 minutes. This is just a short clip where he says why it is very important for rivers to remain free flowing. And he talks about the Narmada, that one could drink water from the source of the Narmada at Amarkantak, and when she met the sea in Gujarat near Bharuch, again one could just drink water. It was so not polluted river. Very rare in India to find a river which is not polluted, where you can drink her water directly at the source and at the place where she meets the sea. And this, he says, is because the river was free flowing. The way in which she collided with the mountains and the rocks and the streams and the ripples, these are natural filters which filter the water, and therefore it remained a free flowing river, remained unpolluted. But if you choke it, it definitely is to pollute the river. So apart from this clip also explains why it is important for rivers to remain free flowing, and they have natural filters within the river that keep them unpolluted.
He speaks so articulately about this filtration process. Nandini, if I may just ask, I'd like to know more about where you see this project now as it sort of stands, and also in terms of what the developments in the valley have been, let's say since you've started this project. I'm just curious to hear more about that. And also in terms of dissemination, because you did talk about that at the beginning of the interview.
Well, let me start with the situation in the valley first. When I started out, of course, the Supreme Court, with these recordings when I started out in the early 2004, 2005, the work on the dam was still far from complete. There used to be stays and there would be increase in height of the dam by few meters, but the dam work got completed in 2017. So the submergence was massive after that, and the dam work is over. People have been displaced, people have not been rehabilitated as per the laws. However, I would say that because of the great delay in the execution of the project and because of the struggle, the rehabilitation is far better than in other projects that we see. Not ideal or not as per the law in any way, but at least there is some rehabilitation that has taken place. The struggle is still on because the rights of the people are still not being given. So the struggle is very much going on in the Narmada Valley. In the resettlement sites, new issues are also coming up. So, in fact, I keep saying the first anti-dam struggle in India, the Mulshi Satyagraha, was against a dam built in the early 1920s. The third generation are fighting even now because they have not been properly rehabilitated. So, for development-induced, forcible displaced people, the struggle will continue one generation after the other. That's the situation. But the very important thing is that people are fighting, and they have continued to demand their rights. So that's the situation in the valley. the benefits that the government was claiming. In fact, the canals are not yet complete here. That's what the Narmada Bachao Andolan was saying. They have not been completed because of lack of funds. In fact, one of the reports of the government of Gujarat says, which has been released by one of the ex-chief ministers, that they've also reduced the canal command area of the project. They've shortened it. So what, as far as benefits are concerned, they've also taken those benefits to the areas which were not supposed to get, like Ahmedabad, Baroda. Waters have gone into the Sabarmati river front. So whatever NBA was saying that this project is not for the drought prone areas, but its main benefits will go to the politically powerful. That's happened. It's very much there to see. So this is as far as the project is concerned. About the oral history, I'm focusing more now on dissemination of what I've recorded. That doesn't mean that there is no scope for any further oral history recordings, because in fact even I have done recording of people soon after their displacement and 5 years after their displacement. What has been the impact? So there is very vast scope people can take up as to after 10 years, 15 years of displacement, what has happened to the next generation of people who have been displaced, to their language, to their culture, to their economy. So it can be a continued recording process. It has a wide scope. But as far as I'm concerned, I have taken a break now for dissemination, because I feel that too is very important. While these issues are very much there and it will help people to in their struggle. So one form has been in the form of disseminating about 31 interviews through edited interviews through website and YouTube of 31 people. About 33 hours of recordings are there with translations in English and in Hindi. Not all are in Hindi. Wherever the interview is in English, the translation is in Hindi, otherwise with English subtitles. There is a book out in Marathi which is based on the oral history of two senior-most tribal adivasi leaders of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, and that has been published in Marathi by one of the leading publishers, Rajhans. It's gone into second edition, so I'm very happy about it, because Maharashtra is one of the very large dam building states of the country. I plan to add a few more interviews which can be heard directly on the YouTube. So, and finally, I'll have to think of, I've not yet thought of the long term, where will these recordings be? All the 400 hours, 80 people have been interviewed. So it's still an ongoing work. It's not that the work is complete.
Something that really strikes me when you speak is that we somehow think of oral history as a project which is kind of defined in time. But I think from what you've described, no, it's an ongoing living project.
See, it is history, right? So I began from 1961 when the first set of 6 villages, Adivasi people, got displaced, and what had happened then. So there were only a few survivors at that time when I started out. In fact, most of them are gone now. So Mulji Bhai Tadvi, he was 5-time Sarpanch. He was a young man when their lands were acquired in 61. So he talks of that. And today their lands have been transferred for the Statue of Unity related purposes. The lands were acquired for the dam in 61, which was a much smaller dam, Navagam Dam at that time. And now in 2017, the Statue of Unity the largest statue in the world got inaugurated. And their lands which were acquired for the dam are being used for tourism related purposes. It's never ending. It's never ending. This is a history project. So what happens to the next generation of?
Nandini, if I may ask, we continue to see the rise of hydroelectric projects in India. Despite the Narmada experience, it's almost like history keeps repeating itself. And I wanted your view on that, also in terms of energy becoming, let's say, such a hot button issue around the world, people talking about renewable energy and moving away from fossil fuels. And I just wanted to get your perspective on some of these questions which are coming up.
Yes, in fact, I'm very disturbed by this whole fact, as if like the thrust is that dams are green source of energy, and as if only the coal-based energy generation is dirty. So you cannot have this kind of an argument. Even renewables like solar and wind have very huge social, economic, ecological footprints. So if you continue to want and consume energy at the scale we want today, then any kind of energy generation will be very disastrous, to that scale. So we need to have look at what is the kind of energy we want, for whom, how is it equitable, how is it sustainable. And so you cannot say that no carbon but this and that suffice. You will have to do this accounting of how much, for whom, for what, and from where. Because every form of energy generation will have footprints, and very serious ones. So I feel that it is very wrong to consider dams as a green source, but particularly in fragile zones like the Himalayas, where you have then landslides, you building roads into territories where you then have landslides, blasting. It's a disaster.
Thank you so much, Nandini. We're looking forward to putting up all these resources and letting people really spend some time with the wonderful archiving that you've done.
I am very happy to have spoken because, oral, your program is again oral, narrative, and you can listen to it later. It's not live. So I'm very happy to have been in contact with you and doing this talk with you. It's been amazing. I wish you all the best for many such talks. And please visit as much as possible the archives, listen to the people themselves, and feedback would be very interesting to have too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nandini. All the best for your work. Thanks to Nandini Oza for sharing her thoughts with us. The Subverse is the podcast of Dark and Light, a digital space that chronicles the times we live in and reimagines futures with a focus on science, nature, social justice, and culture. You can follow us on Instagram at Dark and Light Zine. If you like the show, please tell a friend and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. The Subverse is produced for us by Waka Media. So long, and thanks for listening.